Amvelgaard, the City of Scales. It was a heavily fortified port city that borders the sweltering jungle of the Charwind coast in the realm of Akshi, the realm of fire, also known as the Crucible of Life. The city was located in a strategic location which watched over both the Golvorian Passage and a highly contested and valuable stretch of ocean filled with precious resources and long-lost treasures. The nearby volcanoes are constantly erupting and drowning areas of the jungle in molten lava, which infuses the flora with Aquitian magic, causing the flora to grow back with unnatural aggressiveness. In order to stop the growth from overrunning the city, the noxious defoliants are sprayed out by the Underworld Arsenal alchemists and are released into the air by great dragon-headed guard towers, causing plant life to wither and die. Although they are harmless to the city's inhabitants, it shrouds the streets in a semi-permanent grey murk. Amvelgaard was invaded by the Daughters of Cain, led by the newly ascended Morathi Cain, with the help of the elves of the Black Scale Coil during the fall of Amvelgaard, despite resistance from the Stormcast Eternals, Freegil's Dispossessed and Loyalist elves. The city was annexed in her new empire and was renamed Har-Kuron. So how do we start a Anvilguard Cities of Sigmar army? And so to start looking at that, let's look a little bit about what we get for playing Anvilguard Cities of Sigmar. And so obviously, as mentioned, it's a Cities of Sigmar sub-faction, so we're going to get all the different rules that we get from being Cities of Sigmar. This includes empowered endless spells, which means things like the Geminins of Ulgish, Emerald Lifeswarm, and all that have multiple effects of empowered by insert realm here. Get those empowered effects at all times when cast by Cities of Sigmar wizards. This does mean when they're potentially moved back at you, they are moved back at you with your empowered effects. It is a spell that's cast as empowered, not the use of the Cities of Sigmar playing, making them empowered. We also get access to the Honoured Retinue and Loyal Shields rules. The Honoured Retinue allows you to pick one unit of 5 to 20 models, so long as your general is under 6 wounds, and have them as a retinue for your general. While this unit's within 3 inch of your general, every time your general takes a mortal wound or wound on a 4+, they can instead allocate that wound to the Honoured Retinue. Effectively, they throw themselves in the way of harm, protecting your general, as any good Honoured Retinue would do. We also get the rules where we have the Storm Keeps, which means we get 1 in 4 of our units within Cities of Sigmar can be a Stormcast Eternals unit, and they become a Cities of Sigmar unit, gaining the keyword Cities of Sigmar and the associated free city. They don't get any of the benefits, though, from any of the Stormcast Eternal Battle Tome traits, etc. The last thing we get is we get the General's Adjutant and the Wise Council rules. The General's Adjutant, while you have a General around, can be another character with 6 or less wounds, and whilst that character at the start of your turn is within 3 inch of your General, thanks to the Wise Council rule, they can roll the dice and on a 4+, gain you an extra command point. But let's start talking a little bit about Anvilguard. Now we've got the basic Cities of Sigmar rules out the way. Anvilguard to start with has a big focus on monsters. Whether or not this is an active way to play the army is up for debate, but they definitely do get a lot of buffs that benefit monsters, such as your Drakeblood curses. And they also get a lot of buffs to take down monsters as well. There's particular warlord traits where you can choose to get your general a little bit better against fighting monsters, and there's also a whole battalion of Scourge Privateers, my personal favourite army, that gets +1 to wound monster, which can be quite good considering the amount of firepower you can get in that army and some of the units that can be taken in that battalion. So the army both kills monsters and can take monsters. The Drakeblood curses give a bunch of different effects to all your monsters, which can be either the Charybdis, Warhydra, or the dragons, excluding the Star Drake. It does not have the dragon keyword, unfortunately. There's also a decent amount of command point generation inside Anvilguard. You can take the battalion, you can obviously get General's Adjutant, and there's also a cool little ability you get with Anvilguard where you get to choose one of 3 different abilities at the start of the game, and one of them is get D3 command points. The other ones are get an extra artifact and get an extra Drakeblood curse, our pseudo mount trait. The army does really reward you for playing 1-2 punch combos as well. I found over my time playing Anvilguard that doing something to make something else better is definitely the way that Anvilguard sort of works. There's no real Lone Star units in Anvilguard. Everything sort of works in cohesion, whether it's taking an Umbral Spell Portal to then cast Vitriolic Spray across the table at unlimited range, and then getting a unit with low rend to shoot or combat that with higher velocity of attacks, really doing some damage. The army definitely rewards playing out these cool little combos within it. But let's look at where we can start building our Anvilguard force. So the best place to start with an Anvilguard army is, of course, picking up the aforementioned Start Collecting Anvilguard box set. This is obviously named for the reason. It gives you a bunch of units that fill into the Anvilguard Charming Beast Hunters battalion, which is really cool. You can actually pick up multiple of this box. I would almost recommend picking up 3 of the box, potentially even, and maybe selling off one of the Hydras, but you could always keep 3 Hydras or Charybdis. They're definitely useful. But it will give you a full unit of chariots. It give you an extra Blackheart Fleet Master, which is not a bad character to have around, considering the battalion works with having lots of Scourge Privateers in it, so you want those command abilities to be used. And 30 Corsairs, you want them in big giant blobs anyway. But back to this box, let's talk about what we get inside it. And so to start with, we get the Blackheart Fleet Master. That's the sword-legged character you can see to the bottom left of the picture there. He's a 60-point hero, so he is really cheap. He does have a 4-up save and +1 save against shooting. He's not too bad in combat. He doesn't really do much, but he's probably going to kill a model or 2 out of any unit he's fighting, so long as they're nothing too tough. But his big thing is he has a command ability for +1 attack on all weapons for a Scourge Privateer unit. This is especially good when you consider the Blackheart Corsairs, when they have the combat variation, have 2 different weapon profiles, so they actually get buffed up to 4 attacks each. It's really quite cool. You can combine this with a bunch of different things throughout Amvelgaard in different combos, and Corsairs with 4 attacks each could really become quite a fearsome unit on the tabletop. Corsairs do have another variation that can be built. They get a combat weapon, which is the lesser of the 2 combat weapons they get, and they can also choose to take a repeater handbow alongside this. A repeater handbow is a 9-inch range shooting weapon with 2 shots each. They do hit on 5s, but they get +1 when they're in a larger unit size, so they're going to be 4s and 4s with 2 shots each. This can really be quite effective, especially when shooting at monsters when you take the battalion later down the line, because they can be 4s and 3s and really do quite a lot of damage with those. It's all just weight of firepower, whether it's attacks or in combat or shooting with Blackheart Corsairs. Linking us on to the monster itself, we've got the Charybdis pictured here, but this kit can also be built as a War Hydra. Both are decent monsters. For me, I love taking a Charybdis with the Drakeblood Curse of Felgaze. This gives the Charybdis an extra -2 bravery, as it already puts out -1 bravery, so you have a -3 bravery piece. Now, a lot of people will say that battle shock doesn't matter, but when you've got -3, suddenly a lot of it does start mattering, and you force your opponent to have to put models around the table to limit their battle shock, and forcing just where your Charybdis goes to mean you can put power behind it, and your opponent having to put characters over in those particular places to counteract this, because they're going to need to be using Inspiring Presence when there's -3 on the table plus casualties. The War Hydra has a shooting attack, is a bit more better in combat than the Charybdis, and forms a more frontline role than what the Charybdis does. But it's another decent monster. They've both got 4-up save with monsters, and they both have access to healing, which is cool. Also in Amvelgaard, both of them can be battle line, which is just awesome. Being able to take monsters as battle line is always a cool thing in my books. Last up, we've got the Scourge Runner Chariot at the back, which can also be built as a Drakespawn Chariot as well. Scourge Runner Chariot is probably my pick of the 2. It has a giant Ravager Harpoon, which has 2 shots, 3s and 3s, and Rend 1, damage D3, or if it gets a 60 hit, can do D3 mortal wounds instead. These are definitely probably one of the best units that Scourge Privateers get, if not the best unit that Scourge Privateers get, and they can do a heap of damage to your opponent. But let's start looking about where we go next to with our Amvelguard army. So where to next for an Amvelguard army? Well, the first piece I'm going to suggest is getting a big monster in that's really going to take advantage of those Drakeblood curses. And that is, of course, a Dreadlord on Black Dragon. It just fits all the things to do with Amvelgaard. It's Dark Elf and it's a big monster. So it can take access to the Drakeblood curses, as mentioned, and also it's a really great solitary piece, which when you're generally playing Amvelgaard, you want some pieces that can float around the table and really do a good, solid job. The Dreadlord on Black Dragon has a 3-up save. He can do a whole bunch of rolls, and he kicks out a decent amount of damage as well, and there's some cool artifacts you can do to make him even tougher. He works well as a single solitary piece that just roams around the battlefield, taking out threats, while the rest of your bulk of your force sticks together and deals with the enemy army en masse. After that, though, a Sorceress is definitely a decent pick. She's a fantastic wizard, and she goes along with a lot of Dark and Covens units, which you can make great use of in Amvelgaard. She's got a really neat War Scroll spell that's Word of Pain, which always does D3 mortal wounds, just making it that much better to use than Arcane Bolt. But it also gives -1 to hit as well, though it does have 2-inch shorter range than Arcane Bolt, so there is a little bit of a negative there. She's got a really cool ability, which is her Sacrifice, where she can do a mortal wound to a nearby Dark and Covens unit and get +2 to cast, meaning a lot of spells are really easy for her to get off, such as a very hard 8 to cast a Vitriolic Spray, which is an Anvilguard level spell. Alongside her, though, you definitely want to be taking a cheap chaff unit. Dark Shards are a great shout, though Dread Spears and Bleak Swords all perform the role, and they are both a little bit cheaper than Dark Shards, but I think Dark Shards, because you're sticking them near your Sorceress at the backfield, you're going to get a little bit more out of them than you are the others. It's worth mentioning that the Sorceress does have the ability to give run and charge and run and shoot to Dark and Covens units, so late game, if your sacrificial unit is still around, they can be great for grabbing late objectives off your opponent or moving in and killing off the last few units with some shooting. My last pick, though, for a unit for Amvelgaard is definitely Executioners. Now, the big thing with Executioners is they don't have rend. They're a Dark and Covens unit, so they're going to get run and charge alongside the Sorceress, which is awesome, especially when you consider they get +1 to run and charge thanks to having a banner, as do all Cities of Sigmar units. Now, they do mortal wounds when they get some 6s off, however, they don't have any rend. Now, this is where taking the Sorceress comes in handy, because if you can get a Vitriolic Spray off onto a unit and then get your Executioners into them, their attacks start going straight through and the mortal wounds start getting in there as well, and all of it just compounds and makes the Executioners that little bit more damaging. They're also just an absolutely fantastic unit, though Blackguard will do a similar job, which is the alternate build for the Executioner kit. Definitely a great shout for either of them to go into an Anvilguard army. But I'm going to look at a little sample list after this, and we'll start talking a little bit about how we can put together a cool little 1,000-point army list. So this is a 1,000-point sample list for the Amvelgaard. So Amvelgaard, as mentioned, is a Cities of Sigmar sub-faction, so we're going to be taking Cities of Sigmar army and Amvelgaard as a sub-faction. Now, when you choose Amvelgaard as a sub-faction, you get one of 3 of these special rules to go alongside it, and we've chosen Hidden Agents, which is going to give us D3 command points to begin the game with, meaning we're going to have lots of command points hopefully to play around with. For our leader, we've chosen to take a Black Art Fleetmaster, and he's going to be our general. He's also going to have the command trait Blackfang Crime Lord and take Dabblings in Sorcery, which is effectively Blackfang Crime Lord allows us to take another one of the 3 options we have for Amvelgaard, is all these cool little abilities, and Dabblings in Sorcery is going to give us access to another Drakeblood Curse. You can also take one that's also going to give you access to an additional artifact, though I don't think we really need it in this particular list. We're then going to take a Dreadlord on Black Dragon. It's going to have an artifact, which is going to be the Drake Scale Cloak. This is going to give it a 5+ DPR, making that dragon that little bit more survivable, meaning he can shoot off around the table and do all the little things that dragons do by himself. And he's going to take the Drakeblood Curse Jutting Bones. This means when he charges, he's going to do D3 mortal wounds. Some cool little extra splash damage for your dragon. We're then going to have a Sorceress, and she's going to be our General's Adjutant, meaning while she's near the Blackheart Fleetmaster, she's going to potentially generate an extra command point of 4+ at the start of a turn, and she's going to have the spell Vitriolic Spray. Now, I know we picked Vitriolic Spray, it only has a 6-inch range, but there's some really great ways to use it. Sticking her just behind your screens, or just behind your units behind the screens, meaning when they move in, you can start casting your opponent, or potentially hiding her sort of in a U-shape behind your unit that sort of leave a space for her to go along with. It's a really cool way to get that Vitriolic Spray playing that sort of beta strike army. But if she doesn't manage to get in range of Vitriolic Spray, she's still got Word of Pain, which is a fantastic spell anyway, so you really lose nothing by potentially having her there. For our battle line, we're going to have 10 Black Art Corsairs, and they're going to be our Honoured Retinue, so they're going to be sticking around the Black Art Fleetmaster. And the reason we've gone for them as the Honoured Retinue, and not the Dark Shards, who will be near the Sorceress, and because of that, near the Fleetmaster, is because both of them are going to be losing models, one from Sacrifice, one from being the Honoured Retinue, so we don't want either of them to sort of get wiped out too early in the game, so you want to split those wounds going across. Also, it's worth mentioning that things like being stabbed with the Dark Shards, when you combine that, it actually does mean they have to take a battle shock test from losing a model from the Sorceress, so that's always worth thinking of. We then got the one Scourge Runner Chariot. Now it's worth mentioning this can't be the champion model while it's by itself, but it's a nice little piece you can have around doing some harassing of some units, and if your opponent leaves a character isolated, it can potentially go and pick them off with all its shots and combat attacks. We then have a Charybdis, draped by Cursed Felgaze. We mentioned this, it can be a -3 bubble around that your opponent just has to make sure he has Inspiring Presence near, or it's just going to go do some serious damage. It's also, if need be, another fighting piece in the army. What's also cool here is all of those 4 units are battle line, thanks to both being Amvelgaard and our Blackheart Fleetmaster being our general, and just Darkshards being innately battle line. But all of them are battle line. There's a behemoth in there as well, which is really cool because all of them help on different battle plans across the game. And for our other unit, we've got 10 Executioners. Fantastic models. You can easily get these into some combat and get them dealing with some threats, especially stuff that's got a bit too hard of an armor save, hoping to fish for some mortal wounds in them. Though don't take it on anything too extreme, they really don't like taking a punch back. But that's what I've worked out as a cool little starting point for an Anvilguard army. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So we hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our fine community, you can do so by following the link in the description to our Discord server, where you can come chat most of the time with me nearly all day long. Lastly, a special shout out to everyone who supports the channel via Patreon. A special shout out to our Sinful Guard Militia, Christian Weir, Philip Ward, Soren, Kenny Lowe, Alderon Shot First, and Chaos Spawn, and our Sinful Free Guild Regiment members, James and AJC. Thank you all so much for your support. If you'd like to help support the channel like these people do, then you can do so by following the link down to our Patreon and helping support that way, or you can join our YouTube members, which you'll find a link to on our YouTube page. But that's it for today, everyone. Please stay safe, stay well, and most of all, everyone, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.